Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela, I'm a knitter from Dublin, Ireland, and this is podcast episode number 12. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video, and if you're a returning viewer, thank you for coming back again. I really appreciate it. We actually hit 2,000 subscribers recently, so especially if you're one of those new subscribers, thank you so much for clicking on that button. I know there are a ton of knitting podcasts out there, so I feel really honoured that you decided to join us more often. And if you are a new viewer, if this is your first time here, I do upload every 2 or 3 weeks. I like to kind of go into detail about my projects, so I'll talk about any modifications that I've made or any kind of maths and calculations that I have to do to make those modifications. So I do like to go into a lot of fine detail, and I like to kind of talk through my thoughts and of course get your opinions and advice. So if that sounds like something that you would like, then do feel free to click on that button and join us more often. There is a massive spider right above my head. He was like back there and I was going to leave him because he was just chilling out, but he's gotten very active and it's making me a little bit nervous because he's very close to my head right now. Oh, he's dangling. Okay, I have to get rid of him. I'm sorry. Oh God. This is him. He's huge. He's quite big. Ugh. I don't like to kill spiders. I just let them go. Catch and release. Oh, I'm shaking. I don't mind getting rid of spiders. It's not my favorite thing in the world. It makes me a little bit shaky. I feel a bit of an adrenaline rush right now. Okay. Back to the episode. So today we have 2 finished objects, one of which is technically not 100% absolutely complete. It's like 99.999% there, but I don't want to show it as a WIP today and then again as a finished object next episode because I am ready to have this project off this podcast. You could probably guess which one it is. I also have far too many WIPs, so we won't dilly-dally, let's just get straight into it. Also, in case you're wondering, I did get a haircut. I got a big chunk taken off, about 5 inches. It was too long, too limp and lifeless, so yeah, feeling fresh. Anyway, we'll start with what I'm wearing, which is my Courage Henley by Tori Yu, and this was a finished object in the last episode. I can't remember if I talked about it or not. I think I did, but just didn't give my final thoughts because the pattern wasn't out. The pattern is out now, so this was a test knit. And I knit mine in Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colour Dark Ochre, and I knit it on 4mm needles, and I used just under 8 balls to make mine. So I have seen the finalised version of the pattern, and it does take a lot of the testers' advice and opinions into consideration. It's a very well-rounded pattern, very well thought out, it's well written. I would recommend it definitely if you're looking for a Henley style casual fit, which is what I really like about this. My favourite thing is the fit. One thing I liked about it is that it didn't have as many yarn breaks as I have experienced before with saddle shoulder constructions. Actually, I think the T number 1 is the only other saddle construction that I've made before, and that had a lot more yarn breaks than this one. So the way that this is constructed is just a little bit friendlier to those of us who don't like to weave in ends. If I made it again, there are a couple things that I would do differently. So number 1 is there is increases on the outside of the sleeve. I'll actually see if I can put in a photo instead of just showing you here. But you can actually see them there. They start at the elbow and they finish around here, I think. No, here, sorry. So it's quite a short section of increases and they're quite rapid. I find that, especially before I blocked it, it just created quite an unusual shape in the sleeve where it just tapered quite rapidly just below the elbow on the outside of the arm, which I just wasn't really a look that I preferred. I did block it with a towel stuffed into the sleeves to avoid any harsh creases that would kind of emphasize those increases, and yeah, I didn't, and hopefully avoid that kind of look transferring over to the piece after blocking. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it now, but if I did make it again, I would put the increases on the inside and I would also space them out more. So I'd probably start them up higher and I would do the same number of increases because I'm quite happy with the circumference at the cuff and the upper arm, but I would just space them out a little bit more so it's more of a gradual taper. Getting row gauge is important with this pattern, so when you're knitting the saddle pieces for the shoulders, the pattern instructs you to knit to a certain length. If you are off on row gauge, you won't have the number of rows that I assume Tori intends for the knitter to have. So when you go to pick up stitches, according to the suggested pickup rate, which is given in the pattern, and the number of stitches is given, you might not be able to pick up that number of stitches using the suggested pickup rate. You could adjust your pickup rate, but then you're going to get a more gradual or steeper kind of slope at the back. that's just personal preference. I was off by a couple rows. I think I was getting more rows per 10 centimeters. So my saddles were a little bit shorter than they were supposed to be. So I did kind of a mid-project block where I stretched them out quite aggressively to the length that they were supposed to be, and then I went and picked up the stitches. But I do think it's affected the final fit. So if I were to do it again, I would pick up the correct number of stitches along the back. I would just adjust the pickup rate so that, yeah, I could pick up the right number of stitches. And with that out of the way, we'll move on to our first finished object, which is, I need a drum roll for this one. It's my Sweet Shop blanket. I am so happy that this is done. So by done, I mean all squares added and most of the ends woven in. So this pattern is by Laura Penrose. If you are in any way active on the online knitting community, you probably have seen this pattern. And the yarn that I'm using is the Olivia and Oliver Fibres Advent Calendar from 2023, along with Knitting for Olive Merino in the colour Cloud for the white colour. And I'm holding both of them double on 4mm needles. I still haven't figured out the best way to show this. I don't know if I should just throw in some B-roll footage or put up a photo. I think I might put in a photo or do both. But it feels weird to just be talking about it without having it in my hands. But if I have it in my hands, I'm not going to be able to show it, and I'll inevitably put some B-roll footage there anyway. So my blanket has 168 squares. It weighs 940 grams. I weighed it yesterday, and that's with all the ends still attached, actually. I actually took off half the ends and I weighed them, and they only weigh about 0.4 grams, which I just was surprised because it's a massive pile of ends, but obviously they're not as densely packed as they would be in a yarn ball. So the Advent is a circular fade, and it does start on the light pink, which was day 1, but I have started my blanket using the browns, faded into the yellows, greens, and then back into the pinks. So I'm really, really happy with the colour layout on this. I just love how the fade looks, and I had a lot of fun knitting this. I mean, it did turn into a bit of a slog towards the end, but I had fun just watching the colours kind of develop and watching this fade develop. So that was probably what kept me going, I think. Every time I added a new colour, that was motivating to me because I wanted to see how it looked with the rest of the fades. So yeah, there were little things like that just kept me going through it, but it definitely did turn into a bit of a slog towards the end. I'm happy I pushed through though. So this is of course the WIP that is 99.99% finished because the ends are not all woven in. I did start weaving them in yesterday. Actually, I will show that. I did start weaving them in yesterday, and I started towards the bottom, so you can see there. Sorry, not weaving them in. I started taking care of them because I have been weaving in using the Weave and Steven method. So for each square, there are 6 ends to weave in, which means that I would have a total of over 1,000 ends with this blanket. There is no amount of money that you could pay me to weave in 1,000 ends. It's not happening. So I used the Weave and Steven method, which still left me with some ends hanging out, and those ends are only woven in one direction. So I wasn't nervous about them coming undone. I didn't think they would come undone, but the squares are obviously joined in the corners, and at those points, if the ends kind of loosened, the corners would kind of open up and there'd be gaps between the squares. So I didn't want that. So I did want to secure the ends in some way. So what I've done is, for each square, I've basically just paired off the 6 ends into 3 pairs of 2, and I've tied those together, and I've left about 1.5 centimeters before I cut it. It's definitely not the most aesthetic thing in the world. It's not very pretty. I don't care. It's fine. Like, nobody's going to be, well, maybe people will be looking at the back, but like, yeah. So that's what I'm doing with those. And as I said, I got about half of them done. So you can see up here, they're not done. And I would like to get them done maybe by the time I get around to editing this so that I can put in some B-roll footage of it actually finished. We'll see. I'm also not going to block this. I just don't see the need. So once these ends are woven in or tied off, it's pretty much done. There are a couple of ends actually that I do need to weave in with a needle, maybe like ends that I forgot to use the Weave and Steven method, like to weave in as I go. So I do have a couple that I need to weave in with a needle, but that's fine. I can do that. And yeah, it's pretty much done. As I said, I'm not going to show it again because there would be nothing more to show if I brought it on the next episode, so I just don't see the point. For my final thoughts, I am so happy with the yarn. I am delighted with my choice to buy the Advent. I was definitely on the fence because obviously it's a mystery, you don't know what you're getting. There's a chance you won't like it. I actually didn't realise it was a fade when I bought it, and I think if I knew it was a fade, I probably wouldn't have bought it. But I'm really glad I did. I just didn't think a fade was what I was looking for at the time. because I was kind of basing it off her previous advent from 2022, which was all different colours. There was no fade, and I thought the colours were beautiful, so that's why I bought it. I'm really happy with it, so much so that I've already purchased her advent for this year. So it's actually a sock set advent. There's 4 or 5 sock sets, I can't remember. But yeah, I've ordered that. I actually got the shipping notification yesterday, so I'm really excited for that. And I'm kind of glad that I'm not getting another 24 mini skein advent, because this was just, it was so much fun, but it was just a lot of work, and I feel like sock sets are not as much pressure. I would buy a 24 skein advent again in the future, but just not this year, because I, got it out of my system, quite happy with that. I just don't feel the need to get another 24 skein advent. So I'm really happy that I'm getting a sock set advent this year. As for the pattern, I did mention a few episodes ago that it's not my preferred style of pattern writing. It's a little bit more conversational than instructional, I guess. There are like numbered steps for the actual instructions, but there are conversational style paragraphs, talking about the construction, about colour layout and stuff like that. So I kind of skipped a lot of those, to be honest. I just don't. I'm very much the kind of person that when I get a pattern, I just like to get straight into it. So there are different instructions for the bottom row of squares and the left column of squares, and then all the rest of the squares have their own set of instructions. So once I knew how to make all of those middle squares, as I call them, even though the right column and the top are obviously not middle squares, but they follow the same instructions. Once I knew how to make those, I didn't look at the pattern again, to be honest. I actually didn't even read past that bit, so I don't know what else is in there. I think there's a chart for planning out your colours, and there's instructions for an optional I-cord border, which I'm not doing. So I think it's a lovely pattern, and I'm really glad I decided to make it with this yarn. I'm just very, very happy with my finished project now. It's been on the needles for 4 months now, so I am really, really happy to have it off the needles and be working on other things. I still have 2 or 3 grams remaining of about 10 of the colours, and I've decided that I'm going to make the Summerlee Colourwork Cuff Club, is that what it's called? August bonus pattern. So I did buy the Colourwork Cuff Club back in, I don't know, it sounds funny coming out of my mouth. I bought it back in August when it was just introduced, and there was an introductory bonus price or a discount price. And I just haven't made any of the patterns yet, and I've been watching Smash Knits, and I think she's made one of the patterns twice, and they look absolutely gorgeous, and she's really inspired me to start making patterns from it. So I've decided that I'm going to make the Granny Square pattern from August, which is exactly what it sounds like. It has kind of like Granny Square pattern going along the cuff. So I have enough colours to make those stripes, and then I'll use the Day 25 skein for the main colour. So I'm really excited for that. I think that will turn out really, really nicely. Won't have time to cast it on anytime soon, but that's the plan anyway. My next finished object is a ribbed beanie. So I did show this in the last episode, but I actually frogged it after uploading that because, as I mentioned in that episode, I thought it was a little bit small. But I was going to just knit a little bit more and see what I thought, but ultimately I did decide to frog it. I had cast on 104 stitches, but when I frogged it and reknit it, I cast on 112, which I figured would give me another inch, and it fits really well now. I'm really happy with my decision to do that. I actually wasn't going to recast it on because I had so many WIPs going on, but I was at a hen and it was away for the weekend, so I thought it would be nice to have something to work on that would allow me to still be sociable and chat, something that I didn't have to concentrate really hard on or look at charts or anything like that. So I cast this on just before that weekend and I got it done later in the week. So it was a pretty quick project and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I don't know if I mentioned this is a gift from my sister for Christmas. I used Sandnes Garn Double Sunday in the colour Coffee Bean, and I knit this on 3mm needles. It is all in 1x1 rib. I kind of wanted something similar to the Stockholm hat by Petite Knit, but I didn't buy the pattern because I didn't get gauge, and I was also be knitting this inside out, and I also wanted to introduce this double knit fold, which I'll talk about. So I didn't buy the pattern, I just kind of decided that I wanted the crown shaping there. And also, because I did this test knit for Tori U, we were offered a free pattern from Tori, and she has the Manhattan hat, which is a similar 1x1 rib with this nice crown detailing. So I figured there's no point buying in the Stockholm hat if I could just get the Manhattan hat from Tori. So as I said, I did knit this inside out, and that is because of the ribbing. My 1x1 ribbing tends to be quite messy. the knit stitches. I'll show you the wrongs. Well, I mean, so this is the side I knit on, but now that it's inside out, that is on the inside. I think it looks quite messy. You might agree or disagree, but my wrong side of ribbing definitely looks a lot neater. So that was my plan. It did make it difficult when it came to the decreases because I had to think about what decrease I needed to work on the wrong side to get the decrease I actually wanted to show on the right side. So if I wanted to knit two together on the right side, what purl decrease would I have to work on the wrong side to get that to show? I ended up frogging it once and restarting it, and it took me a while to figure it out, but I got it in the end. In hindsight, I should have just bought the Stockholm hat pattern or else waited for the Manhattan hat pattern to arrive in my inbox, which only happened like 2 days after I cast this off. So I was just really impatient. I should have just waited. I also really enjoyed working with the yarn. I just kind of wanted to keep working with it. The double Sunday just feels really nice in my hands. So yeah, I enjoyed working on it and I didn't want to put it down. For the double knitting fold, I basically worked 3 rows where I slipped all of the purl stitches with the yarn in front, and I knit the knit stitches, and that basically created this natural bend where the hat wants to fold. I think it worked out really well. I followed a tutorial that showed how to do it for a 2x2 rib flat. I obviously just did it for 1x1, and I think it would make a difference doing it flat or in the round because you would be switching what stitches you're slipping and whether or not the yarn is in the front and whether the yarn is in the front or the back. But that's basically what I did, and I'll include those notes in my Ravelry in case you want to do it yourself. For the bind off at the top, I think it looks really good actually. I'm really happy with it. I used a variation of the Kitchener stitch for a 1x1 rib. And just a side note, I know some people are trying to move away from saying Kitchener stitch. I'm also trying to move away from that, but I don't really know what else to say in its place. Like, grafting to me implies lots of different methods of joining two things, whereas Kitchener is obviously a specific type of stitch. So yeah, so I did use a tutorial from Heather Sorta, and she basically grafted 2 swatches together. The technique basically involves separating your knits and purls onto 2 separate needles. So you actually have 4 needles for each side, and then you graft, I can't remember, the knits on one side with the purls on the other or something like that. But my point is that you have to flip it over to do the other side. And because this is a hat, I had DPNs sticking out either direction, and I was kind of like, how do I get onto the inside? But I just flipped it inside out, and then I slid the DPN a little bit so that I could get the end of the DPN in and through onto the other side of the hat, if that makes sense. And then I slid it back the other way to get the other end in and through the other side of the hat, and then I was able to graft on the inside. The inside is definitely a little bit messier than the outside, but it's on the inside, so nobody's gonna look at it. I would love to try this on, but I have makeup on, and if it was for me, I would have no problem, but because it's a gift, I obviously don't want to get makeup over it, so I'm not going to try it on. But I have tried it on with no makeup, and I love it. I want to make one for myself. The only thing I would do is I would make the brim taller, so I think it's about 3 inches. I would probably do 4 inches next time. With hat brims, I tend to do the same thing that I do with sleeves and with the body length, where I always worry that it's too long and I err on the side of caution and I make it too short. And so the same thing happened here, but it still looks good. I just think for my personal style preference, I would add 1 inch next time. So that is my first Christmas gift done, which is great. I'm really happy. So we'll move on to WIPs. For once, I don't have 17 balls of yarn hanging out of this. It's my Rivendell Cardigan by Sari Nordland. Again, I'll just put in some B-roll footage so you can actually see the full thing, but it is a drop shoulder V-neck cabled cardigan by Sari Nordland. I've modified mine to be a saddle shoulder or a variation on a saddle shoulder type construction because I want the sleeve cable to extend all the way up to the front cable instead of just starting at the drop shoulder seam. If you are new here, I have so many episodes talking about what I did in detail, and I also have Ravelry notes, so if that's something you're interested in, definitely recommend going back and looking at that. This project has been on my needles for a long time, I think possibly 3 months, which is kind of long for me. So there is plenty of video footage documenting the whole thing if you want to have a look. The yarn that I'm using is Sandnes Garn Tin Peer Gint in the colour 4672 and Filcolana Tilia in the colour Amethyst. And I'm knitting the body on 3.5mm needles, and the ribbing was done on 3mm needles, and the double knit button band was on 2.5mm needles. In the last episode, I had yet to bind off the body, and I had to finish one sleeve I had already bound off one sleeve and I had just started the button band, I think. So since then I finished the body, that's done. As for the sleeves, I had mentioned in the last episode that they were too long. So I did frog it. I frogged the cuff and about 5 centimeters of the main sleeve / cable pattern. And I just restarted the cuff then. And at first I was happy with the length, but after a week of kind of trying it on and it, you know, it just relaxed into itself, I realised it was too short. So I was actually going to leave it, but I brought it to my knitting meetup and my friend rightly advised me to frog it again and redo it. So I frogged it again and I reknit those 5 centimeters of cable pattern that I had already frogged, and then I reknit the cuff, and that is one sleeve now done, bound off, and I'm happy with the length. It's staying. The second sleeve I have just reached the cuff, so don't have much more to go on that. And then onto the button band, which is the true dilemma here. I had knit it from the back neck down on either side because I wasn't sure if I'd have enough yarn. Thought my candle was gone out. And because of that, on one side, the joining stitch that you join your button band to the body of the cardigan with was on the right side, was on the outside of the cardigan, so I used a knit 2 through the back loop. On the other side, that joining stitch was on the wrong side, so I used a purl 2 together, not thinking about the fact that I should have been doing some kind of twisted stitch to match the knit 2 through the back loop. I should have done purl 2 through the back loop, maybe, something. So as a result, that purl stitch has kind of opened up and is not very defined. You know, when you get a twisted knit stitch, it's quite a defined stitch. It's very separate from the stitches on either side of it, whereas that purl stitch has kind of opened up a bit and almost from a distance blends into the body of the cardigan. So not the button band side, it blends into kind of the body of the cardigan, and the result of that is that from a distance that button band looks narrower than the button band that has the knit 2 through the back loop, that twisted stitch, which again creates that very sharp border between the button band and the body of the cardigan, and it looks wider. So I actually didn't notice it for a long time. Like, I had moved on, I was working on the sleeve, and then I had tried it on a few times, but just one particular evening when I tried it on, I kind of noticed that the button band was narrower on one side than the other. And yeah, I just realised that it was because of that joining stitch being not twisted. So yeah, that was upsetting. I did ask on Instagram if it was worth redoing and frogging, and a lot of people voted and I got exactly 50-50. So I am no closer to figuring out what I should do. Someone did reply and suggest that I aggressively block, which I'm surprised I didn't think about myself. So that's my first plan. I'm going to aggressively block that button band, the narrower side, and see if I can make it wider. And if I can't, I will probably frog that half of the button band and redo it. So yeah, a moment of silence, please. So yeah, I'll do that today. I have a few things to block, including the hat, so I'll block everything together. And I am trying not to get my hopes up. To be honest, my hopes aren't up. I don't think it's going to help that much. So I'm trying to accept the fact that I will have to frog it and redo it. If I do have to redo it, it'll probably take me 3 or 4 days max, you know, of pretty focused double knitting. So that's not too terrible, and I know for a fact that it will be done by the next episode, and that is probably the only thing getting me through now at this point, because up until now I just haven't been able to see the finish line. It's always just been so far away, but now I can see it. Like the hem is bent off, one sleeve is bent off, the other sleeve could be bent off this weekend, and then it's just half the button band, and that could be done within a week if I wanted to. So yeah, we're so close. We're so close. It will be done in the next episode. There is no doubt in my mind that it'll be done in the next episode. And I just keep saying that to myself to make it easier to accept the fact that I have to redo this button band. It's funny because the more time I put into this cardigan, the more I want to fix mistakes and imperfections. And that means more time spent on the cardigan, which means I even more want to fix those mistakes and imperfections. And it's just a vicious cycle. Of course, I would love to hear your opinions down below if you think it's worth frogging or not. On Instagram, I just put a picture of the button band up close. So I'll put in some B-roll footage and you can let me know what you think, if you think it's worth frogging or not. Personally, I probably am going to frog it if I can't get it to block out. So yeah, we'll see. But I would love to hear if you think I'm being absolutely crazy, or if you think that it is worth redoing all that work. The buttons are en route. I have ordered some really nice vintage horn style buttons. Actually, they are horn buttons. I'm going to go into a bit of a side note here. I don't know anything about buttons. Some YouTubers seem to have a button person, a source where they find buttons. I would love to know where to get buttons. Where I do have a local yarn shop, but they have quite a small selection of buttons. So if you are based in Europe, or even better, if you're based in Ireland and you have somewhere that you regularly get buttons, I would love to know, because I went onto Etsy and I did find some. I find shipping prices on Etsy to be quite high usually. I don't know if I'm like looking at the wrong sellers or something. I don't use Etsy a lot. So, and I know you can filter by country, but I don't think there's a great selection in Ireland, or maybe I'm wrong. And that's why I'm asking you guys. So yeah, if you have any sources for buttons, please do let me know. I also have a question about horn buttons. Like, horn buttons are quite popular, and me being very naive, I was looking up horn buttons and then just didn't cop the fact that they're made from actual animal horns. And I don't know if that's a bad thing. Is that like the equivalent of like ivory or something? Like, I'd obviously rather not use them if they're unethical or unsustainable. So that's why I got vintage ones, because I figured that they've already been used and they were maybe produced and bought a long time ago. Maybe not a long time ago, but like, you know, not recently if they're vintage. So they're not being sourced for me. But I also couldn't find the kind of buttons I was looking for in like a fake style, like a plastic imitation horn. Does that exist? Because that's what I would prefer, I think, if it's like unsustainable or unethical to use horn buttons. I know there would be some people who have very strong opinions either way. I'm open to hearing them, definitely. So yeah, please do share your thoughts. Let's have a button conversation down below, because I am new to all of this and I would love to hear from the experts. My next WIP is my absolute favourite project right now, and it's also my most neglected project right now, and it is my Ingrid Sweater by Petite Knit. I love it! I love it so much. I know it's not much to show, but I'm just so happy with how it's turning out. Okay, this is a pattern by Petite Knit. You've probably seen it. I am using Eru yarn, which is an Irish yarn company. Their BFL Romney Sport Weight base. This was gifted to me. This is the colour Sea Song, and it's, I don't know the exact percentages of yarn, but yeah, it is a BFL Romney base. This is the colour Sea Song, and it's just this beautiful sea foam, green, blue. I think in some lights it actually looks kind of grey. Such a beautiful colour, and I'm actually holding it with Gepard Garn Kitsetta in the colour Light Sea Green. And I am so happy with how it's working up. I cannot wait to have this and to be able to wear it. I'm just loving it so much, and I only wish that I had more time to work on it right now. So I do have the back yoke done, and I've obviously joined the left and right fronts, and now I'm working on the mock cable section at the front row, or in the front yoke. I am also knitting this on 3.5mm needles, and I'm knitting the size small. I suppose the main thing to talk about is about the dye lot, which I did talk about in the last episode, but I just have some more updates, I guess. So if you're new here, just briefly, I ordered 8 balls of this mohair to make this jumper. The yarn shop emailed me and told me that half the balls were a different dye lot, and they did send me a photo. There was a slight difference, but I decided to go ahead with the order anyway. So the update is that basically the back yoke, I worked the entire back yoke by alternating the 2 mohair skeins. So every 2 rows I swapped the balls of mohair, and I think that looks great. I'm really happy with it. The front, I actually decided to take a bit of a risk, and I just stuck with one. So I started with the left front, and I stuck with 1 ball of mohair until I got to where you can actually see I joined the new ball. So I stopped using the original ball and I joined the new ball, so a different dye lot. And because this is a German short row section, you would basically see a difference in colour, or you would expect to see a difference in colour kind of going up here. So you would see this triangle in the original colour and the rest of the left front in the other colour. So the fact that you can't, I mean, I don't think there's a difference there. Maybe on camera, I might, you know, when I'm editing this, I might look back and see a difference, but I have really tried to look for a difference because I obviously don't want there to be one, and I wouldn't be the type to pretend that I couldn't see a difference. I genuinely cannot see a difference, so I'm really happy with it. I don't think it's going to be necessary to alternate balls of mohair through the whole project as I did with the back, but I also don't have enough of either dye lot to finish the whole jumper, so I will have to swap in and out the different balls here and there. It was pretty tedious to swap them throughout the back because they just kept getting tangled with the wool, so every time I wanted to swap a mohair I had to unravel them all and then rejoin, or sorry, pick up the new mohair balls. So that was pretty tedious, and I didn't want to have to do it for the rest of the jumper, and I am pleased to report that I won't have to. I might just alternate mohairs between different textured sections, or I might introduce some form of helical knitting if I can. Obviously it's not plain stockinette, so that might be tricky. The moral of the story is that the different dye lots are not really affecting my project, so thumbs up for me. I worked the back yoke pretty much all out of one skein of the Aero yarn, and then I had to join a new skein. I had to start a new skein when I started the front, and I actually think that there is a slight discrepancy in colour. So you from here to here, I think this looks a little bit more green. It's very slight, and at first I thought it was because I wasn't alternating the mohair balls for this section, as I mentioned, but once I joined the new ball of mohair and I saw no difference between here and here, I kind of figured that it must be the wool. So I think I might have to start alternating the wool skeins, just because I don't mind it as much here because this will be on my shoulder, and you know, it will be pretty difficult to see if there's any difference between the back and the front. But if I get halfway through the body and I have to join a new ball and there's a slight discrepancy in colour, like that will show. So once I get to joining in the round, I think I'm going to start alternating skeins of wool. We'll see. I have a few things to think about with that, but yeah, that's a problem for future Michaela. So yeah, I'm really happy with how it looks so far, but I will say my 2x2 rib is not the neatest, and I have never really had a problem with 2x2 rib in the past. I know I've already talked about 1x1 rib in this episode, but I've never really had it with 2x2, so I'm kind of disappointed with that. I think my knit stitches look quite wide, or just one of them on here, this side. So the leftmost on camera, unless it flips it, looks quite wide, and it's the same on the wrong side. So yeah, I did find a Nimble Needles tutorial for making your 2x2 rib neater, or making any rib neater, so I'm going to try and follow that once I get to the 2x2 rib section for the front yoke, and we'll see if that helps. I am particularly excited to work the collar. I really love the collar in the Ingrid Sweater. I think it starts as a 2x2 and it switches to 1x1, I think, or maybe it's the other way around. Either way, I really like it. So I think once this is joined in the round, I am going to pick up for the collar and work that, because I just really want to see how it looks with the collar on it. I am following this pattern to a T because my brain is just completely depleted after the Rivendell Cardigan. So I think that's why I'm loving it so much, that I just don't have to do any thinking. I'm just doing exactly what it tells me to do. It could tell me to light this on fire and I'd be like, okay, where's the lighter? Like I'm like a zombie when I'm knitting this. Once the Rivendell Cardigan is done, I am definitely going to be able to dedicate more time to this, which I'm really happy about, because yeah, I'm really enjoying working on this and I want to wear it. So yeah, that's my Ingrid sweater. My next WIP, I have so many WIPs. My next WIP is the Mackenzie scarf by Sari Nordland, and it looks so good on camera. Wow, oh my god. I love how that looks. So this is Mackenzie scarf by Sari Nordland, and it's a 2-colour brioche scarf. It's gorgeous. I love it. The yarn is Ballyhora Fibres 4-ply sock yarn in the colours Lake Muskery, which is this dark teal, and Wild Atlantic Way, which is this grey blue kind of colour. These are both from her Ireland collection, and she did gift them to me. The collection pre-order has closed, but if you like these colours, definitely recommend giving her a follow on Instagram. I'm sure she'll be doing an in-stock update at some point, so I would keep an eye out for that if you want to get your hands on either of these or on any of the other beautiful colours in the collection. I'm knitting this on 3mm needles, and it's actually my first time doing 2-colour brioche, my first time doing any kind of brioche, and I'm enjoying it. I am enjoying it more than I thought I would. I have heard that 2-colour brioche is easier because it's just easier to see your stitches on the needles. If you've never done brioche before, you basically work each row twice, so once with each colour. It's easier to see what type of stitches you are you have on your needles and what type of stitch you should be working. So yeah, maybe it probably won't make sense if you're if you haven't done brioche, and if you have done brioche you might be screaming at your laptop or your phone or whatever telling me that I'm wrong because I might be wrong because I am very new to brioche. There was a knot in the yarn, so I broke the strand and joined a new one, so that's why these ends are here. I have made a couple of mistakes, but I've impressed myself by fixing them just by looking at the stitches next to them and seeing what they should look like. Basically reading my knitting and figuring out how to fix the stitch that way. Actually, the first time I did that, I had worked a decrease, and when I reached that decrease on the return pass, which was like, because of the nature of the brioche, was three rows later, maybe. No, 2 rows later. Yeah, it wasn't the next row, it was 2 rows later. And when I reached that decrease on the return pass, I didn't realise it was supposed to be a decrease, and I thought I had done a regular brioche stitch wrong. So I laddered it back, I undid my decrease, and I reknit it into like a regular brioche stitch. And I was really proud of myself. And I didn't realise that I had not fixed a mistake, I had just made a mistake by removing my decrease. And I didn't realise until I reached the next decrease, and again in the return pass I was like, that looks funny, and then I was like, oh wait, that's supposed to be a decrease. So I also forgot to do a decrease at some point right here. I don't know if you can see that. So there should be 2 stitches, or 2 of these leaning teal stitches between each row of teal here, if that makes sense. So 1, 2, and then you got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I skipped a decrease here, and as a result, I have 3 extra stitches on my needles than I should right now, but I'm just going to fudge in a decrease once I reach the end of this diagonal stripe section, because there will be a little bit of chaos going on when the stripe joins the edge of the scarf, so I'll use the confusion to throw in a sneaky decrease there. It's going a lot faster than I expected. A lot of the Ravelry projects say it's quite long and, dare I say, boring. I have just been really enjoying it. It's not it's not something that I'm dying to pick up. It's not a high pressure project for me. It's a comfort project, and I am able to watch something when I'm working on it. Now, obviously not something, in a different language that I have to read subtitles or anything, but like I put The Office on or another knitting podcast, and I'm able to work on it while I'm watching those. So yeah, I am really enjoying it. I do think the yarn helps. This, lovely superwash wool really lends itself well to something like this. The wool itself is obviously quite soft and spongy and squishy, and when you knit brioche, which is inherently spongy and squishy, it's just like doubly spongy and squishy, and I keep stopping just to squish it because it feels so nice. So I don't think I would enjoy it as much if I was using a non-superwash wool. So very happy with my decision to knit this pattern with this yarn. It just works really, really well. I also made mine slightly narrower than the pattern calls for, so it's about 3/4 the width of what it should be, and I just cast on 3/4 the amount of stitches that's recommended. It is supposed to have 4 of these diagonal stripe sections. I was considering only doing 3, but the fact that mine is narrower means that these stripe sections are going to be shorter, like they're not going to be as long that way. I think I will just stick with the 4 because I don't want the scarf to be too short either. I am pleasantly surprised. I just didn't think I would love it as much as I do, and yeah, it looks great on camera. I think it looks so good. I can't wait to make more progress on it. On to my next WIP, which is another new cast on. It feels really good to have a lot of new cast ons to talk about. So yeah, I'm enjoying this episode so far. This is my Karla Cardigan, or not much. There's not much to show, but it is the start of the Karla Cardigan by Anne Bensel. I'm just gonna, I'll open it up like this. So yeah, this is a pattern by Anne Bensel. This is a Christmas gift for my mum. I'm using La Mana Como Grande in the colours Slate Grey for the grey and Silk Grey, which is this creamy colour here. It's kind of an unusual colour because I wouldn't call it grey, but the name is Silk Grey. But anyway, I'm using 4.5mm needles. I am knitting the size 3, which should give a finished circumference of 128 centimetres. And I did get gauge with my swatch. Well, I got close to gauge. I think I got 16.5 stitches, whereas the pattern gauge is 16 stitches. And I did the maths and I figured that at 16.5 stitches, it would still be a good size. But my gauge seems tighter now, so I'm getting about 17 to 18 stitches in 10 centimetres. And at that gauge, this will be too small. I swatched so long ago that my tension might have just changed, but I am going to just block this. That's why it's on fabric cord. I'm just going to block this and see if it stretches out, but I have a feeling I'm going to have to redo it, which is fine because I obviously haven't made much progress, so I don't mind having to restart. Yarn quantities might be an issue if I have to size up, but that is a problem for future Michaela. Not going to worry about that right now. The yarn feels lovely. It's not super wash, but it is machine washable on low temperature. My mum always washes her clothes in low temperature, so that won't be a problem. I think super wash means it can be washed at higher temperatures maybe, or that it can be put in the dryer, but we don't really use the dryer that much, except in the winter I suppose we do. The cast on edge here is done with Judy's Magic cast on, and then you pick up for the shoulder to work down the front. Sorry, I should have mentioned this is the back. So the back is cast on with Judy's Magic cast on, and then you pick up for the front. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think that will give a lot of structure to the shoulder seam. So if I do frog it and cast on the bigger size, I am just going to cast on with a long tail cast on, and I'll pick up the stitches for the shoulders as I would with anything else, because I just don't think that the Judy's Magic cast on will be very strong on the shoulder seam. If I don't frog it, I'm just going to reinforce it somehow. I'll figure that out later. The interesting thing about this one for me is that there are German short row sections between stripes. So I've just worked one stripe section, and in the pattern there's now an instruction to work some German short rows, then another stripe section, and then more German short rows, and another stripe section, and I think more German short rows. I think that's the last of them then. So I think that's kind of interesting that the German short rows are throughout the back yoke rather than all at the top shoulders, and yeah, I'm curious to see how that affects the construction. So that is my Karla cardigan. My last WIP is another gift, and this is for my friend for her birthday. Just a pair of vanilla socks. This friend, like, she knows I knit and she's seen me knitting and she's always been impressed with my knitting, but one time she saw me knitting socks and she was just blown away. Like, I don't think she realised that you could knit socks. So she loves them. She was really, really obsessed with them, and I decided then and there that I would give her a pair for her birthday because I think she's knit worthy. I think she'd really appreciate them. Her birthday is in 1 week, so these do have a deadline, but I think I'll be okay. I nearly finished the foot on this one, and the second one I've just finished the cuff. Am I blurry? I think I'm a little bit blurry. Okay. The yarn is from the Camel's Yarn, which is a yarn dyer in Cornwall, and it's from a sock set called Parma Violet, which I got in Beautiful Knitters, which is a yarn shop in London, and I think it might be an exclusive for them. I'm not too certain. I'm not sure. But yeah, I really, really love this sock set. It's a BFL. Oh God, what's the composition? I have to look up the composition. It's their BFL sock base, which is 75% superwash BFL. Oh, I didn't realise it was superwash. And 25% nylon. This is actually left over from another pair of socks I made earlier this year, the Morris socks, which I did show in this podcast. It was one of the first projects I think I had on the needles for this podcast. So I had about 58 grams of the main colour left, and I also put some of the contrast colour in my Sweet Shop blanket because I thought it blended in quite nicely with the fade. But after that I had 4.9 grams left of the contrast colour. So I worked this cuff until I had used like 2.3 grams, I think. I didn't want to use exactly half in case the second cuff needed more for whatever reason. I guess I think Nindy Daddy calls it a buffer, which I kind of like that term. So yeah, I didn't use exactly half, so I left a bit as a buffer. And then I moved on to the foot. I am doing a 50 round foot. I usually do 60, but a 60 round foot uses about 60 grams or just under. And because I have 58 grams of this main colour left, I thought that would be cutting it a bit close. So I'm just going to do 50 rounds. Maybe I could do 55 maybe. I had actually started these with the intention of giving them to my sister for Christmas, my other sister, I have two. And then I remembered that conversation I had had with my friend about my knitted socks, and I realised her birthday was next week. So I realised I needed to change tack and make these for my friend instead. So I do have a new deadline. Again, it's next week, which should be fine. If I work pretty consistently on these, I'll get them done. With socks, I usually work on them when I'm on public transport, which is not that often, or on my lunch break at work, in which case I would get maybe 5 rounds done, so not a lot. Socks don't usually work up quickly for me unless it's a more kind of active project, like a special pair of socks maybe that I'm really excited to work on. These are just, you know, like a lot of people, just something that I like to have, something that's portable and mindless. So if I was working at my normal rate, these wouldn't be done by next weekend, but I'm pretty confident that I can get them done. My friend has a job that requires her to visit fields and farms and things like this, and she does tons of walking as part of her job. She'll get easily 20,000 steps a day. So I think she'll appreciate the more kind of rustic nature of the BFL rather than if it was a merino. It might not be as, you know, hard wearing as the BFL. And it's obviously quite a high percentage of nylon at 25%. So I think I was really lucky that I happened to have these on the needles already, as I remembered that I was going to make her a pair of socks for her birthday, because I don't have a lot of BFL sock yarns or sock yarns with that high percentage of nylon. So yeah, it was a really, really good coincidence. And she has the same shoe size as me, so I'm just making them as if I were to make them for myself, and I think they'll fit. I'm going to do a heel flap and gusset, and I'll decrease the same way I do for myself, and I won't do an anatomical toe, again, because I don't know the exact contours of her toes, so I'm just going to do a regular symmetrical toe, and yeah, I think she'll love them, and they won't be on the next episode because, as I said, her birthday is next week, so I won't be able to show them again, but hopefully I'll remember to take a photo and I'll put them up when they're done. That is all of my WIPs. Honestly, it's too many. I've realised 3 WIPs is kind of my sweet spot, and right now I have 5, 6 if you include my ranunculus, which you may or may not have noticed is suspiciously missing from this episode. I just had too much going on and I just put it into hibernation, which it takes a lot for me to put a project into hibernation. Once I start something, I start it with the intention of finishing it. Like I don't like putting projects aside. Even the Rivendell cardigan, I had a few people reply to my story on Instagram telling me just to put it aside for a few days, even a week, and it's just not in my nature. I can't do that. Like I want it done, so I just keep telling myself to power on through and get it done. But yeah, so 5 WIPs at the moment. I wouldn't have started the Karla cardigan except for the fact that it's a Christmas gift. The same goes for the socks. They're obviously a gift. I mean, we're getting into that time of year where Christmas gift knitting is just taking over, so it just can't really be avoided at this time of year. But yeah, the Rivendell cardigan is obviously nearly done. Socks will have to be done by next weekend, and then we'll be down to 3 WIPs, and I don't have any immediate plans to cast on anything after that. Maybe like another pair of socks just to have, and those can be the Christmas gift for my sister or something. I do have one exciting acquisition that I got at a yarn swap that I was at last week with my knitting group. I had brought 3 skeins of hand-dyed yarn and 1 ball of the Knitting for Olive heavy merino that I had left over from this. I had a full ball left, so I brought that as well. It was done in such a way that everyone brought their yarn and put it on a table, and then we went up in small groups, like 4 or 6, to pick up some yarn from the table. So it was kind of done in an honesty system. You know, if you brought yarn, you could take yarn, and then whatever was left at the end, anyone could go up and take whatever they wanted. So I thought it was a really good system. It worked out really well. And when it was my turn to go up and pick some yarn, I picked up a Ziploc bag that had, oh, it looks so pretty on camera, that had these in it. So there was another kind of small ball of this one, and there was 2 of this one. So this I could tell there was 2 full skeins of whatever this was, and this looked like more than 1 skein, and then there was another small ball. So there was no visible label on the bag, but I thought it looked hand dyed, so I picked it up and I brought it back to my table. And when I got back, I had a route through the bag and I pulled out this label from the inside, and that told me that it is Townhouse Yarns, which is a dyeing studio in Dublin. They're the in-house dye studio for This Is Knit. So that's the label, Townhouse Yarns. And is that going to focus? There we go. And this yarn is their Clarendon sock base, which is 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere and 10% nylon. So that's really nice. And the colour is single malt, which is this just gorgeous golden orangey colour. Oh, it's just so pretty. It actually looks better on camera than in person. Like, it's pretty in camera. It's pretty in person, but on camera it's just... And this one is their Abbey lace base, which is 72% kid mohair and 28% silk. And this is also in the shade single malt. So again, that golden orange colour. So they're obviously the same shade, just different bases. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to use these to make an Oslo hat. When I got home as well, I weighed them. In total, there's 160 grams of the Clarendon sock base, and there's about 100 grams of the silk mohair. So 2 full skeins and just over 1.5 skeins, which is great. I'm really happy to add these to my stash and to obviously give away yarn that I wasn't going to use. I did bring to give away this skein of single ply yarn that has been haunting me ever since I bought it. I bought this in London when I had just started buying hand-dyed yarn. So I was still a PhD student and I was still too poor to buy hand-dyed yarn, and I didn't buy it that often. I didn't really know what I should be looking for. So at the time I bought a sock yarn and I bought this single ply Madeline Tosh yarn, and this is the colour Gigi Loves Orange. It's obviously exactly what it says in the tin. It's bright orange. I think I bought it with the intention of making a Musselburgh hat, and I've since kind of decided that I don't know if I want this colour on my head. So about 3 months ago I made plans to use this in a colourwork t-shirt. I actually made my own colourwork chart and I was going to use that, and I for a while was very excited about it, and then I kind of lost interest again, and once again this was just back in my stash, but I didn't really know what to do with it. Then when my knitting group announced this yarn swap, I was like, perfect, I'm finally going to get rid of this. Nobody took it, so it stuck with me again, and yeah, it is haunting me. I don't know what to do with it. I might just go back to the hat idea. Maybe not a Musselburgh. I might make an Oslo hat or something and hold it with a mohair that will tone down the orange. Unless you guys actually think that I could wear this bright orange colour on my head. Do let me know your thoughts. I have also heard that single ply yarn is good for shawls. I won't wear this in a shawl, so it's just not going to happen. I can just veto that idea straight away. It's not going to happen. I think a hat is the only kind of option. And then, so I went to my local yarn shop, This Is Knit, and I was picking up random skeins to hold with this and see if I could come up with anything. They had a really nice single ply yarn that had, it was grey, but it had these shades of orange through it. And I was thinking, is there something I could do with the two of those? There was another skein that was like their silk mohair base, and it was like electric blue, but it had vibrant pinks and purples and oranges through it. And I was like, how would that look if I held those two strands together? Because it is mostly electric blue, but it does have orange. Would it just look like a marled blue and orange hat? I don't think I'd want that. I don't think. But if it was more like a blended, then maybe, see, I just don't know how it would work knitted up. And I don't want to buy a skein of bright blue and pink and orange silk mohair if it doesn't look good with this. I'm not going to use that. So I don't know what to do. The safe bet, the safe option would be to buy a silk mohair that's kind of a toned down orange, maybe a peach, and hold that with this to make an Oslo hat. That's the safe option. Part of me is also thinking, if I have this really bright colour, maybe I should just go all out and do something mad with it. And I do have brightly coloured hats and things that I do wear. So it's not that I wouldn't wear it. I actually do have an orange hat that I do wear. So I don't know why I have suddenly grown so averse to having this colour on my head. That was a bit of a ramble. I'm sorry. It wasn't supposed to be part of the podcast. But here we are. These things happen. But that is everything. So thank you so much for watching. If you've reached this part of the video, I am really, really grateful that you watched the whole thing through. And I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know down below if you have any thoughts or questions. My favourite part about these videos is responding to your comments. It does feel like more of an engaged community on YouTube than on Instagram. So I really do like that aspect of it. I love responding to comments. I love getting into conversations. I love talking about knitting. That's why I make these videos, because I want to talk about knitting. So if you also like to talk about knitting, talk down below. Put a comment. Let me know anything that you want about your knitting, about what you're working on, whatever. I want to know. Let's just have a chat about it. So if you did like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel and I'm really grateful for your support. If you're not subscribed and you want to see more, please do subscribe. We would love to have you over here and be part of this community here on the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. So hopefully I'll see you in the next one. But until then, happy knitting. Bye.